Hello. Hi.
Deliverance from the insane asylum. Joe, a 34-year-old psychotherapist with a professional development consulting firm, wrote to me in August 1992 that he had had a variety of ET experiences going back to early childhood and felt the urgent need, as scared as I feel, to air out these closets. As a designer and leader of adventures in nature, Joe helps people to overcome their fears, including fear of the dark. When he contacted me, he recognized that he was struggling with my own fear around the dark. About 3 months before he contacted me, while a massage therapist was working on his neck, Joe suddenly had an image of lying on a table, surrounded by small beings with large heads, one of whom was putting a needle in his neck. He screamed in horror and could no longer deny the disturbing power of his experiences. He learned of my interest in the abduction phenomenon through another abductee and also from the roommate of a woman who was assisting me in my work, and wrote a letter summarizing his experiences. When I first met Joe, he and his wife were expecting their first child in 1 month. The exploration of Joe's alien encounter experiences in the context of his wife's pregnancy, labor and delivery, and his own evolving role as a father has given us a rich opportunity to examine the relationship of the abduction phenomenon to Joe's consciousness of the cycles of birth and death over time, including the report of a dramatic past life experience. In 4 hypnosis or relaxation sessions between October 1992 and March 1993, 1 before and 3 after his son Mark's birth, we explored the complex dimensions of Joe and Mark's relationships with the alien beings he reported. Joe has struggled to integrate the alien-related elements in his own identity. The personal liberation and growth that this integration has permitted has been a remarkable aspect of Joe's case. Joe, the 7th of 8 children, was born and grew up in a small town in Maine. His father, who sold leather and threads to shoe factories, died of Alzheimer's disease a year before I met Joe. Joe calls his Irish family pretty typical Roman Catholic and said that they were manifestly happy but actually dysfunctional, and that his parents tended to be cold and emotionally tight. I wasn't hugged or kissed much and spent a lot of time outdoors where I felt safe and accepted. We grew up playing in the outdoors, he told a seminar group I was teaching at the Cambridge Hospital, hunting, trapping, fishing. Joe, like other abductees, has felt that his relationship with what he calls the ETs has provided emotional nourishment, support, and love when nobody else would. He describes his mother, Julie, as a fearful person who initially did not want to hear about his ET experiences, becoming frightened and flustered when he would try to tell her about them. He remembers waking his parents one night as a child to tell them of a frightening experience and being told, "You just had a bad dream." Joe does not believe that any of his siblings have had abduction encounters. "I've talked with them since," he says, and received a mixed reaction from denial to acceptance. From the time he was 8 until perhaps 15, Joe liked to spend summer nights sleeping outside on a porch with his younger brother, who does not necessarily believe in the abduction phenomenon, but told him recently, "You were always afraid of UFOs." As a teenager, Joe became aware of how separate and alone he felt. Basically, social puberty blues. Recalling that time in one of his regressions, he said, "I just don't connect with anyone. I don't fit in." Joe's wife, Maria, is a psychotherapist, 5 years older than he. They met at an alternative therapy teaching center and had been married for 5.5 years when I met him. They had been trying to conceive for 2 years, but Maria had 2 miscarriages. Joe has reported seeing 2 babies, toward whom he felt very loving, in a very lucid dream, and wonders if they might not be fetuses of his and Maria's who were taken by the ETs. Joe identified intensely with his wife's pregnancy, and in his August letter to me wrote, "Not unlike the labor my wife will be facing, I am experiencing contractions that are increasing with intensity and are painful if I resist." He, in turn, found that often after Mark's birth, The old feeling of not fitting in came back, and he felt like the fifth wheel. Joe finds Maria, who he does not believe is an abductee, basically supportive in relation to his experiences, and says that they look to each other for love and support. From the time he was a teenager, Joe pursued spiritual understanding and has participated and taught in a number of personal growth-related activities, including various mind-body healing workshops, psychosynthesis, different forms of meditation, and membership in a spiritualist church. When he was 20, he spent a year living alone in the forest in northern Maine. Joe has worked therapeutically with people in alcohol recovery, with sexual abuse cases, and incest survivors. For several years, he has been leading what one of his brochures describes as team-building workshops, staff trainings, and customized retreats, which are offered for individuals and organizations. He is also a valued consultant to other professional development groups, especially those that lead excursions into nature, including outward-bound schools. Yet behind his personal quest and professional competence, Joe has always sensed fears of darker forces outside of his control that were associated with his ET experiences. About 10 years before we met, Joe was told by one of his own spiritual counselors that he would someday be working with people from other planets. Joe has had dreams of contact with alien beings as far back as he can remember. Sometimes he would wake up with his penis feeling sore. In his relaxation sessions, he described experiences in which sperm was extracted mechanically, and I've also seen infants that I felt they were showing me because they were in part my own. Joe believes that the ETs were interacting with him even in the womb, and in our last regression, he recalled seeing the beings around the hospital bed when he was only 2 days old. Like many people with a history of abduction experiences, Joe had many unexplained childhood nosebleeds. When he was a small boy, he had a recurrent nightmare that a witch, like the one in The Wizard of Oz, would fly up to his bedroom window, force him to look into her huge eyes, and make him climb out onto the broom by hypnotizing me. Once I looked at her in the eyes, I was all hers and she would whisk me away. Throughout his childhood, Joe was fascinated with but afraid of UFOs. He would sleep outside, but have difficulty falling asleep because he was afraid that as soon as I did, somebody had come and take me away. Additional childhood and adolescent experiences emerged in the hypnosis sessions, including an experience from the age 13 to 15 period, which will be described shortly in detail. Joe continued to have fears of UFOs and alien beings through his adolescence. Once at 16 or 17, when he was experimenting with LSD, he became panicky to see a small ship about 200 yards away, and there's somebody in it looking at me. He thought it was checking me out and went just a little bit out of the way and dropped into the trees. During this period, he had another experience in which he looked in the mirror in a bathroom in his home and felt himself starting to sink. All of a sudden, he said, I was looking through a window and it wasn't me. It was an alien who was face to face looking at me, and he was round-headed, and it was very knobby-skinned and kind of just warty, bumpy, and I think it was like grey or green, with maybe a small mouth, thin neck, and then wham! The reality of it hit me. I just freaked because I felt incredibly vulnerable. It wasn't like, hi, my name is whatever, and how do you do? I felt like here's somebody from another dimension who's going to go, whoosh, pop, I'm gone. I'm history. They find Joe's shoes in the bathroom. The intense pain and fear that Joe felt in association with the material that came to him during the May 1992 bodywork session drove him to seek my help. He told the seminar group, as a therapist is working on my neck. I had a memory which totally blew me out of the water, and it was of being on a table about this high, not quite so wide, being surrounded by little people with big heads, and they're putting a needle in my neck. I'm terrified, I'm screaming, and I almost broke out in hives in that moment. He was also anxious about the impending birth of his baby and his own imminent fatherhood. Our first relaxation session was on October 9th, about 10 days before Maria's official due date. Joe spoke of anxiety-filled dreams of UFOs, alien beings, and procedures on a table in a subterranean room hewn from rock. Maria herself was having dreams of the baby coming out and talking, about travels of his own on a spaceship. Joe told of other complex, dark dreams involving mythic snakes, fish, dark birds, sexually threatening women, mythic gods and winged horses. Vast, wind-swept landscapes and scenes that seemed both epic and fairy tale-like captured his feeling of loss of control, helplessness, and fear as the time of his baby's birth approached. Images of a needle being put in his neck during the spring bodywork session returned, and Joe said, "I want to release some of this fear in the session." We reviewed the various abduction experiences of his life, but in the end opted for an open-ended regression in which his unconscious mind would suggest its own direction and focus. Joe's first image in the altered state was of a non-human being with a triangular face and a large forehead, narrow chin and large black elliptical eyes. "It's inviting me back," he said. "It's moving away and drawing me forward. It's got long, thin arms. God, it's got a long, thin back." Breathing heavily with mounting distress, he said, "It can move gently. It can move fast. It wants me to lie on the table. It's looking me deep in the eye, telling me to relax." Whispering now, Joe said he was scared because, "I know they're going to do something. My whole spine aches. My groin is on fire." Sensing that his fear was running ahead of his ability to handle it, I asked Joe to locate this experience in time and place. He said it occurred in his home when he was a young teenager, 14 or 15 perhaps. It began in the late evening when he was feeling separate and very alone. Feeling restless and needing to go outdoors and connect, Joe said he walked behind the barn in the rear of the house as if drawn there by a real subtle force. He walked through the barn, sometimes the barn feels a little spooky at night, and looked up at the stars. That's when the ship came down. It came right down. Bam. There it was, small. The ship, he said, was kind of round but oblong. It's kind of like an egg, a standing-up egg. The craft was real symmetrical, more oblong on the top half, and about 4 feet off the ground, with some sort of feet holding it up. Joe felt frightened as a thin figure whose face is all lights, dressed in a one-piece, tight-fitting black outfit, approached him. He felt he had gone with this figure, whom he calls Tanoon, many times before, and his greatest fear in this moment was that he will not want to come back to the earth at all. Joe felt impelled to go. There is no choice in that sense, but I am more aware of the choice that I can go and not have to come back. He felt a tightness in the neck as the fear he feels with respect to the torn allegiances between the alien and earth realms mounted in my heart. Sobbing, Joe said, "I'm not alone with him. I know that. That's okay. But he's not there every day." Joe said the being communicated to him that he must return to work with them human beings and that I've got to have my foot in both worlds. With his very round face, right next to mine, Joe said that Tanoon put his hand on his shoulder. He's very comforting. And we kind of walked, kind of floated into the bottom of the ship, which seemed much bigger inside than outside. Tanoon, Joe said, took him down a hallway to a large room with a table that he has often been placed upon. With one hand on his head and one on his hip, the being reassured Joe, who felt, "This guy really loves me, and in a way, I don't feel anywhere else." And that's kind of scary, because it made him feel so different from everybody. Joe lay on his back on the table with his arms at his sides and noted he was wearing a white metallic robe. He avoided looking into the being's eyes to reduce the intensity of the connection for which he also yearned. Too open to them in my stomach would make the relationship with the beings more real, and it makes me more like them, which is very hard to integrate. In addition to Tanoon, who was in charge, Joe described 8 to 10 slightly smaller beings surrounding the table. The one on my left held a large needle, about a foot long, with a kind of hilt, as Joe anticipated intense pain. Tanoon told him to look inside his eyes and relax by losing himself there, but he feared I would disappear and not come back if he let go completely. He's inviting me forward and I'm scared. It's like I'm inside him, inside his head, inside his eyes. The needle penetrated the left side of Joe's neck below the ear, almost like against my skull. It was very painful, but became less so as I look more into his eyes. Once in, the needle was moved around and the pain ceased. Joe felt both that they're taking a little bit of something out and they're putting something in that will make it easier to follow me. He said, they're putting a picture in my mind of a small silver pill-shaped thing that they're leaving there, which has 4 tiny little wires coming off it. After the needle was removed, Joe was told, "We are close. We are with you. We're here to help you. We're here to guide you to make it through your difficult times." After this, Joe described being taken further down the hall to another ET who seemed to him like a head honcho. He was sitting in a chair surrounded by light which appeared to come from him. This being was taller than the others, he said, with a face that appeared more human. He's putting his hands on my head. It's like he's baptizing me. He likes me. He's energizing me. He's blessing me. He's giving me something to help me hang in here. He's giving me strength and knowing, just knowing that I'm not alone. I'm loved, and I'm connectable with both them and on Earth. Sobbing, Joe said that he was told, "They will be closer if I let them. You don't have to be so far away. It's just a matter of time when it will be okay." Experiencing a struggle to be both alien and human, Joe felt confused as he returned to the Earth. He perceived, the part of me that's waiting for me behind the barn looks like them. This was the part of me that didn't want to go. Joe pulled back from that part of me because he looks a little like them. Soon he was by myself behind the barn, feeling kind of mixed up. His body felt tight and uncomfortable as he returned. "I don't know where I belong," he said. During this abduction experience, Joe received an incredible glimpse by going in their eyes, by just connecting with them and leaving any separation. A sense of what it would be like to go completely into the ET or alien world. I would just go out of myself and go anywhere, to world, space, planets, distance. "Your body or your consciousness or both?" I asked. "Without my body, sometimes in my body, I become wind, I become space, I become matter, I spin, swirl, slow, fall." In the alien form, Joe said he could experience different energies. Dancing drops, orchestras and music, crash, bang, hard places, dark places, vast. I feel bliss. I feel love. I feel connected. I feel unsafe. I just am in whatever I want. I dance. It's dance everywhere. Dance with different beings, different lights, different energies. It is so different from everyday life, being Joe, that it is just so difficult to integrate when he comes back to Earth. Joe did not describe exactly how he experienced being returned to the starting point behind the barn. He recalls walking into the barn, then to his house and upstairs to sleep. But just before I brought him completely out of the altered state of consciousness, Joe remembered being told by Tanoon, "Your baby is one of us." The us, including Joe himself in his alien identity. Joe and Maria's baby, Mark, was born on November 10th, about 3 weeks after the expected due date. About a week after Mark's birth, Joe wrote in a note to me, "As I write, mother and child are napping together. Home finally after 5 days in the hospital. Mark Joseph was born by C-section necessitated by breech position and infection last Tuesday, and watching the surgery brought me full circle with my own experiences aboard UFOs. It was interesting, enlightening, and reassuring, and it gave me greater trust and surrender to this whole process." A second relaxation session was scheduled for November 30th. We talked first about events connected with the hospitalization and birth, which had been especially stressful for both parents. Mark had seemed to talk to his mother in utero, and she had several dreams in which Mark told her the name that they were to give him. Joe spoke of an abduction experience that occurred 2 nights after he brought Mark and Maria back from the hospital, in which 2 beings were beside him and sent a shot, like a burst of energy, into his head using a blunt instrument, and left him feeling foggy and disoriented. Maria was with him, but he does not recall seeing the baby. This was the most conscious experience I've had to date. In the beginning of his second session, Joe talked of his care not to burden Maria with his ET experiences, despite her receptivity, of his own resistance to accepting their power in his life, and the feelings of vulnerability that they created. "I'm afraid to face a part of myself," he said. With strong emotion, verging on tears, Joe spoke of his distress at the discovery of how intimately involved, with the alien beings he was, in cahoots, a kind of double agent, working with them and thereby betraying his Earth partners. "I'm split," he said. "I lead this secret life, and the secret life is that I've spent a lot of time with them." But more than this, what troubled Joe was his sense that he was a willing partner with the beings in using unwilling humans for a breeding project. Even last night, he had had an experience in which he reported seeing a large alien infant head with huge, dark, beautiful eyes, with whom he felt a special connection. Although he felt that the hybridization project might be worthwhile, an evolutionary thing, every time you hybridize you get more vigor, he was not sure what species would benefit most. Almost crying in his distress, Joe said he had the sense that he had had a recent sexual experience on a ship with a woman who didn't want to. We decided to try to get more information about this in the regression in order for him to expand his awareness of his complex dual role and to increase his power to choose freely. At the beginning of the session, Joe reported seeing a parade of images on a spaceship, a variety of people who seemed to be derived from a chaotic gene pool. Some of the beings were ugly, even evil-looking. It seemed like a kind of interplanetary United Nations. The total impact of this was to give Joe a harmonious feeling, as if he were being shown they're all there in good company. His own form kept changing, like a chameleon. He felt more comfortable in a shape like them, somewhat translucent, with a large head and big elliptical eyes, long and thin in the torso, light greyish in colour, the hands a little webbed with long arms and fingers, 3 and a thumb. Wow, I feel like I'm inside me. It feels very elegant, very graceful. I feel like I'm no longer walking, just kind of moving, most like swimming. It's opening up to a part of the ship that feels like a heart valve or something. It just feels very, very spacious. Etherical, fluid, and a sense of vastness were other ways Joe described what it felt like to be in the alien form. He felt incredulous, doubting his experience and wondering how he could hide from himself that, "I also exist here, on the ship. I'm just so much more comfortable." He felt then an intense struggle between his humanness and the humanoid identity, which he had maintained as separate. Yet he also felt that he was more fully integrated in being human than most alien beings. Joe called the race of beings to which he belonged in his humanoid identity the Brotherhood or the Obasai people. Thought processes for these forms are intuitive and not linear. I feel like my thoughts are available to everyone, and there's nothing to hide. There's no shame. There's a sense of oneness, and we can have different ideas and opinions, but yet there's still a blending harmony. This part of the ship, he said, is for integration. It spends a lot of time around Earth. Other projects are not Earth-related and involve other dimensions, other galaxies, but time and space is not an issue. Travel occurs when you just think yourself there. Joe told then of an experience he had had just a few days earlier as Orion, his humanoid identity. He felt himself to be 7.5 to 8 feet tall, although he sensed that he could make his body taller or shorter. A blonde woman of about 35, he called Adriana, was brought to him, so that he could make love with her and give her my seed. Although Joe felt that she's been involved a long time, it troubled him, at least in his human self, that a part of her was frightened. Adriana, Joe said, was walking her dog at night when she was abducted and was in a sleepy state when the beings floated her into the ship. Part of her freaked out when she first saw the ship, Joe said. He felt loving and gentle toward Adriana, stroked her head, reassured her that we care for you, and encouraged her to relax. I wouldn't copulate with her without, on some level, her cooperation, her agreement. Adriana was placed on a slightly tipped platform with her head higher than her feet. She was kept in a sleepy or dreamy state. Mentally, they create like this web. They just drape her in this soft, gentle energy. As she was undressed by small beings, there is that fearful part of her that just totally doesn't want any of this to be happening. And when this resistance bubbles up to the surface, the beings controlled her through a kind of energy massaging. The sexual or reproductive act itself was quite brief. 3 or 4 of the beings watched as Orion inserted his small, almost hollow penis, erect, but not real hard, not like, unbending. It just works its way in. Perhaps half the thickness of a human one into Adriana's vagina. The testicles were just some bumps on his body. They don't hang out or anything. Although there was fondness and love on Joe's part, it's not horny passionate. It's not a rhythmical in-and-out intercourse. It feels more like just a rocking embrace. Very soft and very gentle, quite natural, like a kinship. Joe wondered if I changed my shape, because when I lay down on her, I'm not much bigger than her, and just kind of rock a little side to side. It doesn't take long. It's more like intent. It's not like I have to work myself to a place where my body will release it. I can just put it in and release it. A clear fluid just oozes out. Although Joe or Orion caressed Adnana lovingly, she appeared to be split. Part of her is totally present, and the interaction feels beautiful, but her stormy, fearful part felt violated. Reproductive acts like this, Joe said, are necessary so that humans aren't lost in their race and their seed and their knowledge, for human beings are in trouble. A storm is brewing, an electromagnetic catastrophe resulting from the negative technology human beings have created. Adriana's fertilized seed, for example, might be taken back out of her, and then we'll grow a baby that's got a lot of human in it, and raise it as one of our own. If the humans totally die, we have their children. The purpose of this hybridization program, Joe said, was evolutionary, to perpetuate the human seed and crossbreed with other species on the ships and elsewhere in the cosmos. Joe spoke sadly of the inevitable further deterioration of the Earth. Many humans will die, he said, but the species will not be eradicated. Joe felt conflicted about the information he was uncovering. On the one hand, as a father with a business, he feared ridicule should he make his knowledge public. On the other hand, he felt a sense of urgency in relation to his fellow humans. But the defiant, fearful, egocentric part of him stands in the way of taking full responsibility for what he knows. His human side has doubts, and at times fears that the dark-eyed beings are sinister or malicious, with renegades from other ships that toy with us to make us a good breeding cow. Yet in his Orion self, he does not sense anything of this sort. After emerging from the altered state of consciousness, Joe felt shocked at what we had uncovered and anticipated that he would need a great deal of support in order to come to terms with the complex and disturbing dimensions of his identity. He felt a little incredulous to discover that he was living a double existence. But the emotional power of the session, together with the objective clarity with which Joe could experience being Orion, convinced him of the authenticity of what he had just been through. As a man brought up in an Irish Catholic family in which emotion was squashed, Joe was astounded to see how his abduction experiences had become a conduit, opening him to a wide range of strong feelings. He was particularly concerned for the distress that was caused for Adriana and other human beings by acts such as Orion's. In the end, he came back to the affirmation the session had given to his lifelong feeling that he should have been born at a different time or on a different planet. The session was both validating and confusing for Joe. Over the next few weeks, he struggled with the task of reconciling his ET and human identities. His stress as a new father, and, perhaps most important of all, his sense that Mark II was connected with the alien phenomenon. A third hypnosis session was scheduled for January 4th, 1993, to explore these areas. At the beginning of the session, Joe spoke of his own feelings of neediness, that Mark's presence was stirring, and the lack of nurturing he himself had experienced as a child. His relationship with Maria seemed to be on hold emotionally, sexually, as she was so occupied with Mark. Furthermore, Joe had not felt them, the ETs, much recently, missing the support and love from them, which was adding to his feelings of sadness and loneliness. At the same time as my reality has been rocked by the possible affirmation of the ET encounters, my heart's just blown away by this beautiful little being. How do I balance my needs, the baby's needs, Maria's needs, and the deeper levels being stirred by the ET experiences? Joe asked. Sometimes he feels he is being shuffled, like a deck of cards. Joe wanted to explore under hypnosis my connection with them, but at the same time he did not want to abandon my kid, as he now felt abandoned by them. Before the session began, Joe told of a recent dream in which a lifeless baby was taken out of a plane crash. He picked up the baby and cleaned it off with muddy water and saw that there was something odd about its back. Then he gave it to somebody else to take care of. He associated this with his sense that Mark is, from there, incarnated as part ET, and he feared that they might come and take him out of my arms. "I cannot handle you guys coming and taking him," he said. He felt vulnerable and unsafe himself and worried further that he could not protect Mark, and wondered if he should. Joe's first image under hypnosis was of an ET showing him a tray that they put babies in to weigh them. He also saw babies in high seats who looked human except for big eyes and bony eye sockets. The ETs are gentle with the babies, and 3 greys, one of whom was the same one that works with me a lot, were feeding them a green, clear liquid by putting the end of a cylindrical silver and glass tube in their mouths and letting them suck it in. One of the babies was Mark, who was as fat as he was in real life at the time. Mark was looking up into the ET's eyes and seemed relaxed. The beings sponged the babies with a green liquid, as if to put energy into their bodies. The liquid seemed to be the same substance they gave the babies to drink. The ETs seemed to have a primary relationship with Mark and the other babies, and they're not going to let me interfere with their relationship with him. Joe had the feeling that he once went through a similar experience and felt sad for Mark because he knew there's a painful part that lies ahead for him. He described that we, Joe, the ETs, and even Maria in part, worked out this relationship with him before he was born to us, Joe and Maria. Mark himself was once a grey ET, but his consciousness or soul went from being an ET to being born as our baby. This wasn't any light thing for him. There are risks for Mark's soul, Joe noted, in being human, going into this body. He's making a big commitment. I asked him to explain. It's kind of like putting on a wetsuit and scuba gear, and it's putting on a denser existence, and you can get trapped in it. It can get stuck on you. You begin to believe what your body tells you, and you forget how to energetically disconnect from it, that you're vaster than it. Just maintaining a physical existence can be all-engrossing. Fearfulness and the preoccupation with the care and survival of his physical body could make Mark forget that he's more than his body, and that it isn't a life or death matter for him if his body gets hurt or the body dies, or he isn't socially accepted. If Mark's energy were to become totally focused on his body, then the fear will be overwhelming and he'll just get stuck. I took Joe back to what he had described witnessing as the beings worked with Mark. They were inside a ship in the dark, probably so that Mark isn't distracted by other things. Joe was wearing just a t-shirt and Mark was in his diaper. The ETs were doing a kind of remodeling of Mark so that more of him, more of his energy, could manifest. He connects with them. On one level, he knows what's going on. Or his soul is totally mature as us, but he also has forgotten. And it will be a process of bringing that level of awareness back up to speed. Joe saw the beings holding crystals against his head, moving his hands and shining a light in his eyes and on his hand. It was like a light came out of his eye to look at his hands. They're helping him make that connection. They've got him on his back and they're stretching him, moving his arms and legs. These interventions would enable Mark to be more connected and less fearful, and to experience more soul, more energy, more heart. Because our physicality is so dense, a lot of awareness is required to expand our knowledge beyond the technical level to wisdom. To liberate latent powers, we have to levitate our body and live without eating. Joe felt the weight of his responsibility as a kind of donor, giving Mark over to this evolutionary process, while at the same time making sure he doesn't forget. He's counting on me to help him remember. In his role on Earth, Joe felt like a man he read about who went undercover, admitting himself to an insane asylum to discover the abuses there, but became stuck inside after the people who knew him outside the walls died off. Joe likened his lonely struggle to sell himself and manipulate his way materially, indeed human existence itself, to living in an insane asylum. Let's pretend. Pretend everything's great. Let's pretend we're not all so fucking tight, so tense that we can't even walk straight. Let's pretend. You scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. How, he wondered, was he to raise Mark in the insane asylum so that his spirit could be preserved? At this point, Joe's attention shifted to his own pain and loneliness and his relationship with the beings. He felt intense isolation and aloneness, as if he had contracted into this hard shell, like an egg that's just hard and dark. He remembered the ET's hands on him and felt he was pupating or something as blocked energies were released. He said he was 7 or 8 years old and in a vast space, as if underground. He experienced himself as if split between his ET and human selves. The ET part has got his hands on my kidneys, my lower back, and his human self is trying to relax and open and to connect to him. Oh God, it's almost sexual. Joe was experiencing intense emotions at this point, expressed in sounds like "oh" and "ah." These feelings, a kind of combination of excitement and pleasurable release of tension, grew stronger as Joe spoke of energy moving through his body. The ET part of me is the most grounded and the least changing, and he's kind of like orchestrating. He has the most information of all of us. He's facilitating. Oh, but he's getting healed too. Intense energy, he said, moved up his spine and throughout his body. At first he felt fragmented, but the light. I feel it like light brought his parts together. Joe seemed to continue to absorb energy in slow pulses, which gave him deep satisfaction. As he experienced his ET and human parts becoming integrated, Joe felt less alone. He said he could also connect with Mark. It's like I'm more on his wavelength. I asked him what was the source of the energy he seemed to be taking in. It's me, it's our soul or essence, or my ET self. It had always been there, but I just wasn't energized to it. It was locked from me. I asked Joe what happened during the 7 or 8-year-old period, but he could remember only that it was a hard time. As he spoke of letting go of the blocks, he felt new waves of energy course through his body. More expressive sounds came forth as he felt all these shivers, chills, rolling through me. I feel like I'm expanding like a blown-up balloon. These pleasure feelings seem to begin in the kidney region and radiate through his whole body. After this, Joe's heart opened to Maria, and then he felt himself walking through and closing a patio glass door with the sight and sound of beautiful chimes. I asked about the relationship he had spoken of between his soul and his ET self. The ET self, he said, was like another manifestation of my soul. Then he added, I feel like I just integrated all parts of me towards oneness. He was struck with a powerful image of looking down and seeing his own body as if in a hall of mirrors, and saw himself on many different levels. The experience was intensely beautiful, as Joe experienced walking through these different membranes of myself. The levels were getting together in a harmonious order. It felt real integrated. Joe felt that now he could be with Mark in the human insane asylum. From a more grounded place, he could walk him through the hall of mirrors. At this point in the session, Joe no longer felt himself to be in a ship. Rather, he was in just space, or in many dimensions. There were no right words. A grey being seemed to smile at him and asked, "So how does it feel?" Joe described, "I'm not fragmented. It feels great. It's like oneness." He thought that although the ETs had participated in his process of integration, that it gets bigger than them, beyond them. Something more reciprocal seemed to be occurring, bringing them also closer to oneness, closer to creation. The ET-human connection enables them to become more than just ET and human. Working with us feels like it helps them go even higher. The ET that asked, "So how does it feel?" seemed genuinely curious on his own behalf. After the session, Joe and I talked of the implications of the session for his parenting of Mark. He felt he could more fully be here for him, help him stay strong, and help him stay connected with his higher self. Joe felt that for himself, his abduction experiences, especially as revealed in this session, were like a rite of passage, a step of growth toward becoming more human. He felt that as a human being, he had been part of an experiment that went sour, a kind of aberration of God's creation. We returned to the image of this culture as an insane asylum. Joe pictured himself rocking Mark to sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, feeling the ETs, and real comfortable with them coming and taking him. For now, he thought, they were helping Mark become connected with his own soul. Joe called the whole alien-human project a retooling, creating a different reality where there's the option of humanness. A necessary step in his transformation, he said, was my humanness going into the pain. I'm more integrated. There's no doubt about that, he concluded. I feel like I'll be a much better parent. This session had powerful reverberations for Joe in the weeks that followed. He continued to feel the fragmented parts of himself coming together, and an increase in my soul's love and energy. 4 days after the session, he said he had a kind of energy crisis or kriya evoked during a massage. He sweated and shivered and felt intense pain moving from place to place in his body, starting in the kidney region and flooding his spine and head. I was moaning and rolling around, overwhelmed by the experiential, emotional, physical pain. His ET guides were holding his hands and head, and he was flooded with scenes from his past. A full circular tray of 60 to 70 slides containing 60 to 70 separate experiences. It was like the ETs held my eyes open and manipulated time so that I experienced each tray in 1 to 2 seconds. I felt they controlled the multidimensional shifts. Maria came into the room several times, but he did not want to speak to her out of fear of interrupting the process. He found himself simultaneously confronting his parents angrily as a child and feeling understanding, compassion, and acceptance toward them. Joe spent the next 2 days recovering from this experience. The outfalling of all this is I have felt much more centered and grounded. It is much easier and cleaner to discern what is best for me, how I can best love and honor myself, the one that is wild, outrageous, impolite, and divine, the one that is emerging more and more. I feel my ET guides have been playing a big role in this, and they want me whole and healed. i.e., up and running, ready to go when the shit hits the fan geographically. One of the last things I did Monday morning was to call a business associate of mine and present him with the idea of him taking over a lot of work of my business. It just doesn't feel important anymore. It's not what I'm truly being prepared to do. During the weeks that followed, Joe continued to have a number of ET experiences and to recall earlier contacts. He felt he was struggling to develop a more comfortable relationship with the beings whom he regarded as his spiritual teachers, peers, and helpers. When I feel vulnerable, they are totally present with me. I feel their genuine compassion and understanding. He likened them to sensitive psychotherapists that impel us to grow, but don't handle us with kid gloves. They even seemed to arrange contact with him when he was in special emotional pain. Joe also began meeting with other abductees in our group for more connection and support. In mid-February, I arranged for Joe to speak about his abduction experiences to a psychiatry seminar group at the Cambridge Hospital. In this public coming out, he was able to take this uninitiated group of largely skeptical psychiatrists and other mental health professionals through his story in a disarming and convincing fashion that left the group curious and more open to the expansion of their reality. At the end, Joe spoke of the incredible amount of terror that he still faced, in particular around lack of control, but reiterated his belief that the purpose of the alien-human relationship is ultimately a benevolent situation. Joe requested a fourth hypnosis session to recover material about his ET contacts during his own infancy so that he could further experience myself coming together and deepen his understanding of Mark and strengthen his role as a parent. We met on March 1st. Before the session, Joe noted that he was nervous, remarking that every time I go down into a session, I come back up and it's like the world is different. It has been difficult, though thrilling, he said, to see the world as this cognizant, intellectually understandable place. I would not change my seat on the bus for anything, he said, but it's also scary. Joe told a complex recent dream in which Mark turned into a very thin, white E.T. baby right before my eyes. In the dream he was given Mark to hold, but surrendered him with guilt to 3 women in an underground chamber. He said he wanted to go back in the session to when I was an infant in this life, when I was a newborn and was still connected to the part of me that was an E.T., more so than I am now. I questioned whether Joe should begin the session with an expectation of where he wanted the regression to take him. Nevertheless, his first image was of being a 2-day-old infant alone in a hospital bed and feeling vulnerable and unsafe. Sobbing and moaning, he voiced empty feelings in his abdomen. "Oh God, I've never felt so alone. Oh, it feels so foreign, it feels so cold. Just like isolation, oh, everything is so far away, everything. It's like harsh, it's bright, it's loud. I don't feel nurtured at all. A nurse was there who helps, but it's like she doesn't really see me. She changes me, she dries me, she feeds me. But she did not connect with him. A familiar E.T. is there. He has black eyes with a blue light to them. The nurse seemed not to notice the alien, but the baby felt trust and his love for me. He, the alien, feels like a midwife, reassuring me, touching me, bringing me back, telling me it's okay. The eyes of the alien changed, like clouds moving across the sky. Joe saw concern, sorrow, and compassion move across his face. The nurse left, and Joe saw a female alien beside him. They feel like parents, he said. They're just really nurturing me, really giving me love, really helping me feel okay. The aliens assured Joe that they had been with him in the first 2 days, but it was I who had left. It was I who didn't see them. I got so scared during birth that I shut everything out. I shut them out. I feel like they're holding me, and as I was born, it's like a river, being in this current. And this river just swept me away. I got scared. I had the sense that Joe was talking about the birth process itself and asked him to talk about being born. Then he began to writhe, breathe loudly, slowly at first, coughing and choking, arching his back and hunching his shoulders and grimacing. "I'm scared," he said. I asked where he was. "I'm moving." "Where?" "In the birth canal. It's tight. I'm just scared. I don't want to go." Emitting more powerful groans, shuddering and choking sounds, and gasps with each intake of breath, he said, "I'm coming out." "Oh, God." I asked him then to try to give words to his fear. "It's like I want to do this, leave the womb and be born," he said. "And I know it means being alone. And I want to be alone, almost to get away from my mother. And I'm scared. And God, I'm afraid I'm going to be lost." "Ah." Reassuring him that he was safe now, I asked if he recalled the delivery, for example, whether there was a doctor or a midwife. "It was a doctor," he said. "I got so scared, I shut out. I went internal. I pulled away from everything. God, I went deep inside myself. It's just a scary place to be. Oh, God, I can't believe sobbing now I came back." "Oh, I asked if he came back to somewhere he had been before. "Yes," he said. "I asked about this. Oh, God, it's such a horrible place." I asked him to tell me about the horrible place. With intense feeling and conviction, Joe told of being a poet named Paul Desmonte in a village near London at the time of the Industrial Revolution. Desmonte was arrested, tortured, and he died in prison after blaspheming against the political and religious establishment. I took Joe through details he reported of his arrest, prison experience, and confrontations with the authorities. In prison, he said he was starved, kicked, and beaten with sticks and belts, which left him with broken fingers and ribs. Eventually, they tired of playing with me, till I no longer responded, no longer gave them the satisfaction of crying out. I asked how he had died. Some would say of starvation. I'd say of hopelessness. After 6 to 8 months in prison, he stopped eating the little food they gave him, and the experience became a kind of healing. I asked him to explain. He said, "I had to face the truth of my own writing. Yes, I believed what I believed. I believed that man was greater, but I never went further than that. I always took my stand there and fought and fought and fought. But when I was alone, I had to explore what that greater was." "What did you discover?" I asked. "My own fears, my own judgments, my own biases, and I began to experience them. Then these ETs came back." Joe attributed their return to his struggle to open to a greater sense of himself, to his letting go of my bitterness, and of his head-to-head battle with the authorities. He discovered he was not just a mere mortal stuck in this physical prison of a body and a physical prison of a cell, that I can travel and soar beyond these walls. As he softened, he became aware of them, the beings, and no longer felt alone. At this point, Joe became quite overcome with feelings of awe and wonder. "Oh God, you mean I'm not alone?" he asked, as if to the universe itself. Seeming to speak as Paul Desmonte, he said that in every fibre of my being he had feared the vastness. "I have feared the nakedness. God, the vastness of it all. I cannot hide from myself. I cannot hide from another. It is my shame. It is my sense of unworthiness that I hide, that I want to hide from, that I don't want others to see." I asked Joe to tell what happened from when the ETs came back to the moment of Paul's death. He said he was afraid he would lose them again and become lost himself in this transition to death. I encouraged him to be in the moment of transition. "I'm afraid to feel it." "Oh God," he said. I assured him we were there with him and he would be okay. Joe surrendered then to a state that is hard to describe. It was not unlike the birth process he had gone through earlier. He moaned and coughed, cried out to God and wanted to be held. He felt as if, "I'm being squeezed out of my body. I'm contracting. Oh, I'm not totally present. I'm kind of scared and I'm just starting to space out. I don't want to space out." Moaning and coughing more intensely, he cried, "Ah, ah. Oh, God, they're pulling me." I encouraged him to let himself go. Soon he seemed to lighten. He said a lot of the alien beings were around him, tickling, touching, and rubbing him. Laughing, he said, "It's good to be here." It seemed delightful. Joe said he still had some sort of body as if on Earth, but simpler, lighter, thinner. "It's good to be back," he kept repeating. "This is much more real." I asked Joe to explain to me, an Earth-stuck person, what this other realm was like. "There is a golden thread that connects all life together," he said, "and that you, as all life, are connected to it. And it nourishes you, both as much as you would let it, and yet, no matter how much you negate it, enough to at least sustain your existence. It is a world of choice, and this world, your world, is beginning to make choices that honor that connection. Not that you have been lost from this connection, but you have journeyed far from it. Never lost, not without reason to explore what it is like to live without this connection." I asked if he knew why we had journeyed so far. "To explore its outer limits," he replied, "to see how far from our source we could go. Many are tired of that journey and are now working, flowing, and struggling back to their source." I asked Joe why he made the choice to return via his particular Earth mother. He said he returned to the scariest place to go to face fears of unworthiness, where he could no longer hide. The ETs, from whose love and nurturance he had turned away, had promised they would be with him. With the help of his spiritual guides, he chose his mother precisely because it would be tough and dense. Her fear, tightness, tension, hiding, and pretension were a reflection of my own, he said. I suggested to Joe, one of the rare times I have ever made an interpretation to an abductee, that the sense of constriction in Julie's womb and the terror of aloneness when he could not bond with anyone in the hours after his birth had led to a disconnection from his source and had plagued his life. "We got to know each other, me and the fetus," he said, "and it got tighter and denser and denser and denser. I wanted to be birthed," he continued, "to get out of this womb, to get distance from this woman. But in the fear, he just tightened and tightened and tightened, and I pulled away from everything. I shut out everything." As the session was nearing the end, Joe spoke further of the confusion, isolation, and despair he had felt in this horrific world. His deepest fear is of cutting himself off once again and becoming lost from the source and lost from them. Spreading his arms and breathing deeply, he said, "Would you choose oneness, or would you choose insanity?" The choice is definitely oneness. Before coming back from the altered state, Joe spoke further of his feelings of nakedness and vulnerability and the difficulty of integrating his spiritual being while residing in the density of a physical body. As he returned to the room, he felt a rush of energy and lightness. He embraced his vulnerability. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's like what I see in Mark. You know, he's incredible. There he is, you know. He's got nothing to hide. That's how I feel right now." He also felt as if he were waking up in an alcoholic daze and realizing he had been living with a batterer. But he now felt strong enough and grounded enough that he would not go back. Separate himself from his source. In the discussion after the session, Joe spoke of the aliens again as midwives, helping him stay connected with his divinity. He had the image of being in a rushing river and the current has become too strong. The aliens are as if on a rock on the shore, and I'm holding on to them. They want him to stay connected through this, instead of becoming lost in his fear. Until recently, part of me stayed shut from them. Now he has become aware of them and connected with them. He finds his familiar being beautiful and sees emotions move across his face like clouds moving at high speed. He reflected again on Paul Desmont's self-righteousness and how, when he was beaten and had no resources left, he faced the truth of his antagonism and softened. It was at this point that the alien beings, familiar to him even then, he feels, returned and I could see them. Though he was martyred before his potential could be realized, Paul Desmonte did succeed in getting a village talking a little bit. Discussion Joe's case contains many of the familiar features of the abduction phenomenon, but also takes us to the edge of our knowledge and understanding. One of our fundamental ontological distinctions or categories, the separation of consciousness from the physical world, is challenged by his experiences. We wish to know whether UFOs and their occupants are or are not from or of our physical world. To Joe, his experiences, like those of all abductees, have the quality of coming from outside, of occurring in the external world. Yet some of his experiences clearly challenge this notion. For example, the panicky sighting of a UFO and its occupants while experimenting with LSD as a teenager seems purely a product of consciousness. At the same time, Joe's abduction-related experiences seem to him as real, more real, he said on one occasion, than those that occur purely on the physical plane of reality, and there is no indication that he is psychiatrically disturbed or that these experiences are the product of some sort of psychopathology. As in virtually all abduction experience cases, this leaves us with the choice of searching, vainly, I think, for ways of explaining the phenomena within our existing worldview, or instead of collapsing our rigid separation of psyche and reality, of inner and outer, and opening ourselves to expanded ontological possibilities. The exploration of Joe's case has occurred in the context of his wife's pregnancy, the birth of his son, Mark, and his emerging role as a father. Themes of birth, death, and rebirth are constant in his material. His own feelings of vulnerability were stirred by the helplessness and needs of his infant son. But in addition, the advent of the baby into Joe's life opened his consciousness to information about his lifelong relationship with the ETs, who were agents of love and nurturing as well as trauma. Joe feels that Mark, like he himself, has a dual human-alien existence, but is closer to his alien connection or source than Joe. Through Mark, Joe feels he discovered his own human-alien double identity. At the core of Mark's ET identity, according to Joe, is the separation of his body and self or soul. During the third regression, Joe reported being a witness to extensive feeding, massaging, and other procedures ministered by the aliens to Mark. The purpose apparently being to maintain Mark's connection with his divine source and to prevent him from confusing or limiting his notion of himself to his body or human ego. It seemed to Joe that the ETs were agents of Mark's ensoulment, virtually remodeling him as an integrate human alien being. Joe feels that his responsibility as a parent is to keep Mark connected with his higher self. The danger to Mark in this world, which Joe likened to an insane asylum, would be to succumb to the restriction of consciousness that derives from competition, intrinsic financial pressures, and especially the pretenses of civility that are the hallmark of the business world. The alien beings, according to Joe's material, appear to serve for both Mark and him as what Joe calls midwives, delivering them from the madhouse of their culture to another state of consciousness more compatible with the viability of the planet's life. The aliens also act as agents of Joe's own integration and re-ensoulment. In the second regression, he discovered he possessed both a human and alien identity, which many abductees are discovering about themselves, and that he feels like a kind of double agent, functioning as a bridge between the Earth and the realms from which the beings derive. During this regression, Joe also experienced the ships and the alien realm as the home where he was most comfortable, and he felt the temptation never to return. But his human task has been to integrate the alien human dimensions or parts of himself and become a being that is connected beyond his material or earthbound self. In the third session, Joe had the intense experience of feeling his alien and human parts come together, a profound, ecstatic expansion, a kind of rite of passage that contained both terrifying and joyous sequelae, which extended and deepened the process in the weeks that followed. Joe's experiences, especially those related to Mark's birth, demonstrate dramatically the separation or discontinuity of his being, or soul, from his body. the lightness of the soul's experience in the spirit or other realm, our language fails us here, contrasts with the density of the physical body as experienced in the Earth domain. The aliens are experienced by Joe and many other abductees as much more closely connected with the divine source or anima mundi than are human beings, many of whom are struggling to overcome their extreme separation. Therefore, the coming together of these dimensions of his self brings about Joe's own deeper connection with the divinity, a sense of oneness with all beings, essentially his re-ensoulment. Curiously, the reported alien beings seem conversely to long for a deeper connection with humans, as if the greater density of human embodiment or physicality contains some sort of appeal to them. For Joe, like many abductees, the deep connection that occurs through the large dark eyes of the aliens is a central part of the process of alien-human connection and evolution. Joe, like virtually all male abductees, has had traumatic abduction experiences involving forced manipulation of his genitals and taking of sperm samples as part of a human-alien hybrid project. But Joe has also experienced himself as a participant in his alien identity as the agent of this genetic or reproductive experiment, giving us a rare look into the alien side, although mixed with his human perception, of the reported hybridization process. He felt some guilt, perhaps there are human feelings mixed in here, for copulating with a human woman, during which, he reported, he deposited his seed in her. He felt love for this woman during the act, but it is understandable that a part of her would feel a violation. Through his own experience, Joe seemed to have access to information about the nature of alien genitalia and the reported process whereby the beings deposit a seed or some sort of reproductive substance in a human body. Joe, like many abductees, says he was given information by the aliens that this hybridization process was for the purpose of creating a new species that represented a reinvigoration of life, a step in evolution. Vigor seems a strange word in this context when one thinks of the listless hybrid children that have been described by so many abductees aboard the ships. The current direction of human activity on Earth, Joe is sure, is leading to the extinction of our own and countless other species. The hybrid process was a way, he has learned, of preserving the human genetic substance, though in some other form. What we also cannot know, of course, is in what reality all of this might actually occur. Finally, in the fourth session, Joe opened to a profound past life experience. This material came forth as a result of a choice that I made to pick up on the phrase, "I came back," when Joe was experiencing himself as a 2-day-old infant. This required at least a degree of openness on my part to the possibility of past life experience and a return to Earth from another domain. Otherwise, I could have ignored the phrase and asked him, for example, to speak more of his experience as a 2-day-old and subsequent events. The past life experience seemed not to be arbitrary. Rather, it reflected Joe, as Paul Desmonte, expressing his values and truth, but from an attitude of arrogance, of limited and polarized consciousness, evoking antagonism and resulting in martyrdom. He embraces the same values now, the conviction of greater human possibilities, but his consciousness has evolved to the degree that he can communicate his truth in a fashion that also embraces those whom he would wish to persuade. The past life experience seemed to be important not for the possibility of another discrete existence, but rather as reflecting a stage in the evolution of Joe's consciousness over a span of time greater than a single human biographical existence. This session was also remarkable for the similarity of the intense reliving of Joe's experience of birth in this life and the death of Paul Desmonte. In both instances, there was intense emotion, fear, and ultimately release, as a transition occurred from one state to another. The sense I had was of life as a cycle of birth and death, of transitions from one state to another, evolving over time, and from a larger perspective, hardly distinguishable one from another. The alien beings, ETs as Joe calls them, appear to have been with or at least available, to him as protectors and guides of his spiritual evolution over time, showing up when his consciousness would open and expand, as before Paul's death, and lost to him when his psyche would contract, as after his birth from Julie's womb. This observation may prove to be important for increasing our knowledge of the psychological conditions under which human beings are or are not able to experience the alien presence in their lives. If, for example, the alien beings are closer to the divine source or anima mundi than human beings generally seem to be, then it is possible that their presence among us, however cruel and traumatic in some instances, may be part of a larger process that is bringing us back to God, or whatever we choose